Hello everyone, this is Norm again. Thank you very much for joining in on another stream of art and talk. I will be providing both. You are responsible for your own snacks. Just sit there and listen. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about mobile games, live service games, and Destiny. What comes to mind when I say the phrase mobile games? Most likely you think back on the last mobile game you played, and if it's like most mobile games on the market, it's some kind of mind-numbing, single-tap interface time waster with deliberately grindy mechanics and ads between every level. It is, in other words, a quote-unquote game that was designed from the ground up to suck. But only enough to be annoying, not to suck enough to make you quit. That is the nature of the mobile game market as we know it right now, and it's been that way for a while, for more than 10 years. When a new mobile game is announced, we don't even question what it's going to be now. We know what it's going to be. It's going to be another ad-riddled, microtransaction-riddled time waster. Think about that. That is insane. There is no reason, no technical reason, that you could not have a good game on mobile right now. You couldn't have a game that approaches console level, especially console level from like 5 or 6 years ago. And that's not saying that there aren't good games on mobile, because this is the internet, and apparently whenever you make any kind of a blanket statement, you do actually have to go back and specify every individual caveat. But let's just be realistic here. If Valve came out and said that Half-Life 3 was finally launching, and it was launching as a mobile game, didn't give any other details, crowd reaction would not be positive. Because mobile games come with so much baggage now. We know what a mobile game is. Despite the technical capabilities of current mobile devices, despite the entire breadth and width of potential things you can make on a mobile device, we as a society, and even more as an economy, have turned mobile gaming into this very specific, wretched thing. And no, you can't blame middle-aged moms for pushing Candy Crush to the top of the charts. Compulsive human behavior is what it is. You still need a businessman with no ethics to take advantage of it. So this is the state of mobile gaming today, and the question that I put to you today is, was this inevitable? Because we've got the whole world out there. It's not just America with crappy mobile games. No matter whether it's China or Brazil, France or Korea, mobile game is still code for the exact same variety of trash. There is no isolated pocket of the world where mobile games are full-featured, competent masterpieces. Even Sherpas in remote, windswept Nepal know the pain of having to purchase purple gems. And so again, there's the question, was this inevitable? Was this always going to happen? Was this godforsaken hellscape of freemium games always going to be the endpoint? Because, let's face it, there really is no going back, at least no easy path back. Not without sudden and very unprecedented revolution within the groups that both consume and create these. The nature of the mobile device itself does have some impact on design. It's a smaller device, which means that the interface is, by its nature, going to be somewhat simpler. It doesn't have a multi-button controller by default. The action takes place on a relatively small screen. The physical experience is very clearly not geared towards multi-hour gaming, not unless you have a battery pack and are willing to go blind. So right off the bat, you're already being shepherded towards a, just not necessarily a specific game style, but rather specific ranges of styles that work with the limited equipment. That's not to say that there haven't been mobile ports of some fairly sophisticated games, like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas has made it over the Final Fantasy games, the older Final Fantasy games. But having played Grand Theft Auto on an iPhone, it was about as natural feeling an experience as playing it on a dinner plate. Again, that's not saying that you couldn't have a natural feeling, elaborate game on a mobile device. It would just have to have a lot of work done very specifically ground up to feel intuitive playing it on what is essentially a feedbackless slab. And before we go too far here, I do want to specify I am not using this forum to explore ways of saving mobile gaming. One, because that is definitely beyond the scope of what I have the ability to pull off in like 15 to 20 minutes. But two, and very sincerely, I don't think mobile gaming has a chance, even a single chance, of being redeemed at this point. Not without something absolutely coming out of left field and just changing the mobile game market entirely, to the extent that people are regarding the phone devices, the mobile devices they're on, as completely separate pieces of hardware. The ecosystem is already in place. It's more or less immutable. People, for one thing, people are used to not paying for mobile games. Some of the heaviest users of mobile games, they're on them on the commute, every lunch break, have not paid 1 red cent to play them, and moreover would find the concept of paying money to play a mobile game laughable. In many cases, the same people who will willingly pay $60 or $70 to play a console game. The two ecosystems are completely separate within the social conscious. Console or computer games are made by large studios. They are released with big marketing and fanfare. They're purchased from a storefront like any other commodity. Whereas mobile games just kind of spring up from the dirt and then get served to you through your mobile game device. The industry itself is not interested in attaching a lot of upfront value to a mobile game. So yeah, talking about this, I have no intention of exploring options to save the mobile game industry. It is what it is. Even the few mobile games I like, and I use like kind of loosely here, but like Fallout Shelter, I mostly just mean that it successfully wastes time without being super obnoxious. So no, the reason that I am leading off with mobile games is not to save them, but to hold them up as kind of the post-apocalypse example for the console gaming industry. The scenario we get if everything goes wrong. Because this is important. However terrible, objectively terrible, the mobile game landscape is, it still pulls in massive amounts of money. And that means for the people making a lot of the decisions at the top in this modern era, when your mass, I would say definitely the lion's share of investors, have no actual interest in the industries that they're investing in, for a lot of these powerful decision makers, that blighted mobile game landscape is a paradise. It is everything working exactly as it should. For them, nothing could be finer than turning the entire industry into a huge gray casino floor with legions of dead-eyed, glum, sad-faced players endlessly feeding quarters into rows of slot machines. And that brings us to live service gaming. Okay, so here's the thing. I bring this up at a bit of a funny time for the industry because, to all outside appearances, console-based live service gaming appears to be imploding on itself. Besides high-profile failures like Marvel's The Avengers and whatever that other one was that Square Enix released and it stayed on the market for like 2 weeks. The industry seems to be reaching a sort of equilibrium with existing live service games. Established games like Destiny and Grand Theft Auto Online seem to be doing just fine. If the player counts aren't dramatically increasing, they are at the least not dramatically decreasing. And yet, it seems that every company that tries to introduce a new live service game at this point is being met with indifference and eventually resounding failure. It's great to see. So, yeah, a lot of the dire warnings that I would bring over in regards to the situation with mobile gaming may seem like they're no longer necessary. But heed my words, executives will find a way. Whether it's live service games or loot boxes or whatever AI-based monstrosity they're clearly working on right now, the next bad thing is always around the corner. So it's still a very good idea to look into the live service phenomena and see not just why it seemed like such a good idea, but also why it's turning out to be less of a good idea. For the companies, I mean. Now, to start with, I don't actually think that live service games in and of themselves are necessarily automatically a bad thing. I think just like mobile gaming, they lend themselves very easily to bad things, but the idea of a constantly curated and updated online game space that gets new content regularly, that's not automatically horrible. That's more or less just an online amusement park. The problem, the modern problem, that is the one we're dealing with right now, really started when live service titles like Grand Theft Auto Online started pulling in massive amounts of money. More specifically, when companies started seeing dollar signs in moving to a live service model at the expense of single player. GTA Online is a prime example of that, because once they started pulling in money hand over fist on the GTA Online service, that was it for any future single player content. Take-Two executives were like, single player? Never met the guy before. And if you had no soul, it was very easy to see where they were coming from. By shifting over to the obnoxious online model, Rockstar has been able to operate their entire business on recycled assets for over a decade. And it's worth mentioning that for a lot of the companies that followed suit, they had very good reasons to do so. AAA gaming has gotten ridiculously expensive to produce over the years. Games are bigger business than Hollywood blockbusters now. It's not at all unusual to see comparable budgets between the two. For a lot of companies, live service titles, live service offerings were seen as a way to mitigate risk. Rather than putting all your eggs in one basket of an initial release, a live service game allowed you to continue recouping costs over an extended period of time without significant additional initial expenditure. The only downside to that is that it came at the expense of everything that was good and right with the industry, specifically single-player games. Once live service gaming took off, it started to infect everything. You expected this sort of thing from companies like EA or Activision, who, let's not mince words, if it was possible for them, instead of making a game and selling it to them, to just hook up their customers' wallets to a milking machine, they'd have done that ages ago. EA openly said that they wanted to move pretty much everything they did over to a live service. But where it really started hurting was in the single-player companies like BioWare and like Bethesda, companies where their customers, their player base, didn't want them to make a live service game. It was obvious the people in the studios who were making the live service game didn't want to make a live service game, but these were being pushed out the door endlessly. Games like Anthem, which no longer with us, Fallout 76, which was one of the worst, even by live service standards, one of the worst live service games at launch. And it has gotten better. Believe it or not, I actually do play Fallout 76 from time to time. Although, again, with the caveat, it's not a real Fallout game. But for a long time, especially during the pandemic, when everybody was at home and the companies were making much, much higher profits off of live service titles, it was starting to look like every game that was being announced was going to be a live service game. It was, quite frankly, a horror. And I'm speaking about this in the past tense like it's beyond us. It's not. Live service games are still very much alive and kicking, and they are still popping up in places that, quite frankly, they really shouldn't. What has changed, however, in the last year or so, is that companies are starting to realize that the saturation point for live service adoption occurs pretty low on the meter, which makes sense. If you got a sci-fi game fan, a guy who's just interested in games that take place in outer space, then it would not be unusual for him to give pretty much any space game that looked like it was reasonably intriguing a try. It would not be unusual to see him trying 10 different space games in the course of a year. They're single player, one-off. When he's done with them, he's done. There is no equivalent live service fan. If you've got a gamer who's really into live service games, they're almost always into live service game, singular. They're not spending 12 hours daily jumping in from Grand Theft Auto to Warframe to Path of Exiles to Final Fantasy. They typically are going to find their one game and stay with it. That's fantastic if that game is your game, but if it's not, what a lot of the new upcoming live service games are finding out is that when they launch, the dance cards are already full. And you're finally starting to see the companies realizing it and trying to scramble to make the best of the situation. Like, for instance, with the recent reveal of Suicide Squad. For the people who were interested in the game, I can tell you they weren't interested in it being live service. They were interested in it because it was a DC game coming from Rocksteady. when they finally got a look at how live servicey the game was in action, that did not go over well, and now they're scrambling to make some kind of omelet with their broken eggs. So yes, in the short term at least, I do see companies slightly backing off of live service. Crossing my fingers for it. I don't remember what the exact source was, but I saw a very good point made on the Twitters that because modern games have such a long turnaround time, where we're talking like 5-6 years or more, stuff that in years past may have been an entire console cycle. The trends, the conditions that existed when those games enter development are increasingly becoming irrelevant for the final product. And this just swings back to one of the big reasons that I do not like live service games, which is that the goal of a live service game is always going to be at odds with the goal of the consumer. Obviously, every video game is out to make money. It's out to get its own costs recouped, make a profit, make enough to move on to the next game. If you're a developer and you care about the game, that is the cycle you're looking to perpetuate. You want to keep yourself in the game-making business. And in those instances, there's a symbiotic relationship between the studio and the consumer. Both parties ultimately want the game to be the best game that it can be. That will never be the case for a live service game. A live service game, at the end of the day, its goal is going to be to keep the player playing, whether they want to or not. Okay, anyway, I've talked about this long enough. We are running out of time. So let's finish off today's episode with a few more unusual facts. Fact number 1. Did you know that on commercial flights, the pilots never eat the same meal? And yes, if you've seen the movie Airplane, it is for that exact reason. If one pilot becomes incapacitated due to food poisoning, the other will still be able to operate. And because there's really nothing funny I can say about this that wasn't already covered by Peter Graves collapsing in a flatulent seizure, I shall move on to our final fact. Did you know that in the era around 300 BC, the Mayans worshipped turkeys as vessels of the gods? Yes, the Mayans looked at the turkey, noted how unspeakably ugly it is, and must have thought that that was just some reaction from a botched celestial transporter accident. Because frankly, I live around turkeys. They are not majestic birds. If a disgusting, lumpy, misshapen waddle is your standard for divinity, it's no wonder you died out. Nice pyramids, losers. Anyway, that brings this episode to an end. I thank you very much for sticking around for the whole thing. And since you did stick around, do you mind doing one more thing, just hitting the subscribe and the notification button and leaving a comment for the algorithm? Just say, hi, algorithm. He gets lonely. Also, if you would like to support our art and other endeavors, you can do so at the Patreon address that you will find in the description. Otherwise, I hope the rest of your day goes well, and I am out. Thanks for listening. Norm away. Like the video gamers? We have more such wonders to show you, and all you have to do is subscribe and hit the notifications button.
I mean, you don't have to.
Also, consider becoming a patron by following the link to our Patreon page, where we turn your cash into videos, comics, and games using the darkest of dark magics.
But mostly just cash.